What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet. And today we have a fun edition of the Overthinking MTG podcast. We're going to be talking about Deadbeat Attendant, which by itself isn't a particularly interesting card. However, it comes with a mechanic that is interesting and worthy of discussion. So this was a request from my buddy DuoCat through the Discord, where you can actually submit suggestions or requests for me to do here on Overthinking. And you can use my link tree in the description to get to the Discord, and feel free to throw suggestions or questions out there, and I may get to them if I'm able. And anyway, so this was a fun one. I haven't discussed attractions on this show as of yet, so let's do it. Deadbeat Attendant itself, kind of our framing device, the excuse for us to dive into attractions today, is it's a 1/1 for 1 and a black. When it enters the battlefield, open an attraction. That's all it does. It is an ETB note, so you can trigger this multiple times by making copies of it or blinking it, that kind of thing. Okay, there's some cool stuff you can do there, just because unrestricted ETBs tend to be pretty fun and powerful, so that's cool. But what do you get when you open an attraction? Well, when you open an attraction, what you do is you actually reference a separate deck. It's actually a complete side deck made up of nothing but attraction cards. And attractions were all introduced in Unfinity, which is a set that came out in October of 2022. So as of this recording, not that long ago, really, about 7 months ago. So these are still relatively new to the game as far as Magic is concerned, because when you've lasted for 30 years, 7 months is pretty brief. That said, with the current product release schedule, it feels a lot longer ago than it actually was. But regardless, you have a separate attraction deck, right? So it's a 10-card deck in Constructed. In Limited, it can be as few as 3. But in Constructed, you have a 10-card deck that you can open attractions out of. And you get an artifact. So, for example, one of the attractions, we have Haunted House. This is it's an artifact attraction that has 2 lights lit up on it. Now, all the lights correspond with a number between 1 and 6. And if I'm not mistaken, different printings of these cards will have different lights lit up. So, for example, the one that we're pulling up here shows lights on 3 and 6. You may open one in an Unfinity pack that has lights 2 and 6 or 4 and 6 lit. Now, I believe attractions that have 2 lights lit will always only have 2 lights lit. Attractions with 3 lights lit, etc., will always have 3 lights lit. So there's some consistency there. The reason those lights are relevant is because at the beginning of your turn, during your upkeep, I believe, you roll a d6. And if you hit a number that corresponds to one of the lights that is lit up on your attraction of choice, you visit that attraction and get the benefits of that. In the case of Haunted House, it says return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So if you hit either a 6 or a 3, in this case, on your d6, you just get a free creature, just right back from your graveyard, boom, for the turn. That's pretty cool. Like, that's a potentially powerful effect. And you get that for the low price of putting a 1/1 on the battlefield for 2. You have to hit the die, you have to roll well to get this benefit, but still, like, that's potentially a powerful effect for as little as 2 mana, for as little as a 2 mana investment. That's fantastic, in my opinion. Also of note, with the lights, on every single card, on every single attraction, number 1 is not lit. So if you roll a 1 on that d6, you will not hit any of your attractions. Conversely, the number 6 is always lit. If you roll a 6 on your d6, you will hit every attraction that you have in play. So that's pretty great. Like, so obviously a 6 on that roll is a big frickin' deal if you have a lot of attractions in your deck, and or a lot of ways to open attractions in your deck. And if you're playing an attraction deck, presumably you do. You have a deck of 10 attractions. You want to get as many of those on the battlefield as humanly possible. So there's an element of chaos to this. You don't have control over which attractions you hit on which given turn, but the power level is definitely there, and that's pretty darn cool. And also, you can set up the attraction deck in various ways. There's some strategy involved in how do you select which lights are lit up on your attractions of choice. So, for example, like this one we have here shows 3 and 6 lit. Now, 6 is always lit, so we're looking at number 3. I could choose to have every attraction in the entire deck have the light on 3. And as a result, if I roll a 3 during my upkeep, it's just as good as rolling a 6. We're good to go. But if 3 is lit on all of them, the other numbers are much less likely to be lit up. And as a result, if I roll a 2, there's a higher likelihood of it being a full whiff where I get nothing. Meanwhile, conversely, you can also set it up so that if you open 2 or 3 attractions, you'll have 2 lit up on some of them, 3 lit up on others, 4 or 5 lit up on various ones. And so as a result, unless you roll a 1, you're almost guaranteed, if you have 3 or 4 of these in play, to hit something at the beginning of each turn. So that's pretty fantastic. This is cool. This honestly reminds me of other mechanics that are designed, honestly, with casual like commander in mind. This reminds me a lot, honestly, of the initiative. It gives me kind of that vibe. Because with the initiative, you get this recurring value that snowballs. Now, the key difference between the initiative and attractions, one, how they're costed, but the ability to interact with them. With the initiative, if you can attack the player who has the initiative successfully and like deal damage to their life total, deal combat damage to their life total, you can take the initiative yourself and begin snowballing yourself, but there's no way to stop it. Once the train is rolling, you can hop on it and knock the other person off, but it's rolling. And there's nothing you can do. Somebody's going to get that advantage every turn. It's just part of the deal. Whereas with attractions, your opponents can't take them. Well, I guess they could. I suppose they could take them from you, with game control effects. But for the most part, they can interact with them in almost every way because the attraction itself is an artifact. So it is an artifact that is on the battlefield. If your opponent has a Vandal Blast, boom, your Haunted House is gone. Doesn't matter what you roll next turn. And if all your attractions are gone, I don't believe you roll anything next turn because there would be no effect anyway. So it's very easy to interact with. That said, it is important to note if an attraction is bounced or destroyed, it does not go to your graveyard. It instead goes to something called the junkyard, which is like an attraction-specific graveyard. The reason that they did that is that you can't like reanimate it. So it's gone forever. It's practically exiled. There may be some cards that interact with the junkyard. Honestly, I have not played with attractions myself, but I find them interesting in a very weird way. They're a neat idea. I believe I've been at a commander pod where attractions have been firing, and they're kind of neat. There are some turns where they do absolutely nothing, and there are other turns where they provide an obscene amount of value that outstrips the cost by a lot. And that's cool, and it's a fun, chaotic element. There are also, it's worth noting, because these came out in Unfinity, there are some attractions that are specifically designed with unset play in mind, meaning that you're not allowed to play them in officially sanctioned tournaments. You can't play them in Legacy, and you cannot play them in Commander unless your play group approves of it, Rule Zero style. Haunted House is one that is legal in Legacy and whatnot. So that's the thing. Some attractions are legal, some are not. And it's very awkward to try to determine. At the end of the day, there's a little hollow foil stamp at the bottom of certain ones that show whether or not they're legal. Here, let me go ahead and find one. You got some clickety-clackety ASMR action. Let's go. Okay, cool. So, for example, Centrifuge. This is one that is not legal in Legacy. You'll note there's a hollow stamp at the bottom of it that shows a little acorn. Our Haunted House showed a large oval, which is standard of, for any rare or mythic that you would get in a pack of, a normal standard set. Meanwhile, the acorn stamp denotes that it is not of an official tournament legal card. In Centrifuge, for example, if you visit Centrifuge successfully, it says each player draws a card from the library of the player to their right, and you create 3 treasure tokens. Well, according to the official Magic rules, you are not allowed to have a card in your hand that you do not own. That is part of the deal. You cannot draw your opponent's cards. There are many cards that allow you to to cast your opponent's spells, but you will note on black bordered, non-acorn, Legacy legal cards, all of those are cast from exile or from like the top of their library, or you in a lot of cases you exile them out of the hand or out of the graveyard, and then you may cast them for as long as they remain exiled. They don't actually go into your hand. I believe the reasoning behind that is they don't want you walking away with your opponent's cards. And if your opponent's cards get worked into your hand, it is much easier for you to just shuffle them into your deck and walk away and not think anything of it. I don't know about you, but I know in my kitchen table jank days, I have had to return my opponent, or, return my friends, like, auras and stuff to them, because things like that happened, especially before we were playing with sleeves. Nowadays, with sleeves and whatnot, it's a lot easier to keep track of those kinds of things, but still, that is a fundamental behavior within the game that has remained true. So this does not work within the normal Magic context, within the normal Magic rules. But with that acorn stamp, you can do whatever. And it's designed to do that. These are joke cards. This is designed to be goofy, and they're designed to break the rules. That's part of the fun. And so, we can, and honestly, this is a pretty tame example as far as some of these effects go. There's one that there are cards in here that have you, literally apply stickers on artwork to change the effects of things. And they'll have you post to social media, and based on the responses you get, it changes the effect in the game, that kind of thing. So, these kind of cards get weird and they get silly. And so the fact that they've identified the ones that are less silly and made those legal, I think is kind of neat. But the key detail, they're artifacts. They can be interacted with. So getting back to Deadbeat Attendant, rather, this is a 1/1 for 2 at common, and you get to start the train rolling. This gives you attractions for as little as 2 mana. This 1/1 body is probably going to die a lot. Your opponents are going to remove it. It's going to get blocked. You may have to chump block with it, but you can chump block with it, so that's nice. But we've also seen time and time again, a 1/1 for 2 with a relevant ETB is good enough. You can do a lot with that, There are cards, even in Standard right now, we have Ambitious Farmhand, we have Spirited Companion. Those are key examples of 1/1s for 2 that just do a thing when they enter, and we're good to go. If your deck is built around taking advantage of attractions, Deadbeat Attendant gets you started in a way that's really cool, very simple, and very efficient. And so I'm not surprised that people have experimented with this, and even, in competitive environments, brought attraction decks that feature Deadbeat Attendant. It's a cheap way to get the thing rolling. And in older formats, that's what you need. The other cool thing about this type of card that has a good ETB on a small body, if your opponent's sitting on a Fatal Push or a Swords to Plowshares, they are not going to want to use it on this, because after the ETB has occurred, it's just a 1/1. If you're pulling premium removal from your opponent to get rid of this little 1/1, you, the player of Deadbeat Attendant, are winning. Now, if they have premium removal that can get rid of those artifacts once you get the attractions going, well, that's a different story. But the Attendant itself, not bad. Also, you can do fun things with this. With ETBs, I mentioned being able to make copies and being able to blanket and things like that. Those are all viable options. In black, you also have access to ninjutsu. Creatures with ETBs with ninjutsu are dope, because if you can attack with Deadbeat Attendant and your opponent doesn't block, if they're unable to block for whatever reason, you can then ninjutsu something else, bring Deadbeat Attendant back to your hand, and then, if you have the mana, great. If not, next turn, cast out Deadbeat Attendant again, open another attraction. Value is happening. So, I don't know, there's some cool play with this card. I'm not surprised that it's a thing, and I think it's fun. So thank you, Duo, for suggesting this episode of the Overthinking MTG podcast. There's a lot to discuss here. I didn't even bring up Contraptions, which was the last time an unset introduced a mechanic like this. Contraptions did have a separate deck, but they were all silver bordered. None of those cards were legal in any tournament capacity. So it was this kind of weird thing you could do off to the side that I don't believe counted as artifacts, and they couldn't be interacted with in any way, but you got these advantages, and it was kind of a fun thing to do on the side, but again, it was very much limited to just that unset. So it was, I don't know, it was similar in a way, except you weren't seeing it at Legacy. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out this episode of the podcast. I appreciate you. Hope to catch you on the next one, and stay good to each other, have a good time and all that jazz, and I'll see you then.